Okay, so you're here, you're listening, you want to know what's happening, you want to understand the things that are really going to make a difference in tech, right? Well, let me tell you, today, we are diving deep into AI research and some of the stuff that Stanford is putting out. We're going to be talking about NNetNav, and this is an open source AI agent.
This is a really big deal, and you are in the right place to get the information and understanding of what is going on and what this could mean for the future. And what we're going to be doing today is figuring out what NNetNav is and how it works and really why it's important and what it means, not just for AI, but how we interact with technology. And we've got a couple of great resources we're going to be looking at today, an article from Stanford HAI, and then this opinion piece about NNetNav. So I'm really excited to dive into all of it.
Yeah, well, let's start with the basics. Like, what's out there now in terms of AI agents? And what problems is this NNetNav thing even trying to solve?
That's a great place to start. So recently, we've seen these commercial AI agents come out, and I'm sure you've heard of some of them, right? Like OpenAI's operator ByteDance's UI TARS, and even Anthropic has a computer use feature. These are pretty impressive, and they're showing us that AI can actually do things online for us.
Right, and who wouldn't want help with things like booking flights or finding information online, right? I mean, that's stuff that we all do all the time.
Exactly, and Shikhar Murty, who is the Stanford grad student behind NNetNav, he points out that there are so many repetitive tasks we're doing online that could easily be taken over by this kind of automation. And just think about it.
Yeah, but I feel like whenever we get excited about new tech, there's always some kind of catching. What are some of the concerns that have come up around these AI agents that are already out there?
You're totally right. There are always concerns. So a big one with these AI agents is that they're closed systems. We don't know what data they were trained on. We don't really know everything they're capable of. They probably use a ton of energy, and maybe the most worrying thing is the privacy issues. I mean, if they're doing things online for us, they have to be able to see what we're doing, right?
Yeah, I don't know about you, but the idea of some AI watching everything I do online is a little creepy.
It is, and Shikhar Murty actually talks about this. He says it's one thing to have a closed model helping you write emails or something, but when you have an AI working in your browser, seeing everything you're doing online, your whole browsing history, that's a whole other level of privacy risk.
Okay, so we've got these AI agents that could be really helpful, but they also might be watching us a little too closely. So now tell me, how is NNetNav different? What's the big deal?
All right, so this is where it gets really interesting. NNetNav is built to protect your privacy, and it's open source. Chris Manning, who's Murty's advisor and a big name in AI at Stanford, he thinks NNetNav has the potential to be way more efficient and better for privacy than something like OpenAI's operator.
I think that open source part is really important, isn't it? That means anyone can look at the code and see how it works. There's no mystery.
Absolutely. And NNetNav is also designed to be really lightweight and not use as much computing power as some of these huge models that are out there. But the really cool part is how it learns. Instead of being trained on tons of data about what people do online, it learns by actually interacting with websites. It's like a kid exploring a new environment.
Hold on, did you just say it learns like a child? How does an AI learn by just messing around on websites?
Think about how a little kid learns. They touch stuff, they try things out, they see what happens. NNetNav does the same thing, but online. It clicks buttons and fills out forms, all sorts of things to figure out how websites work. And by doing all of this, it creates its own training data.
So it doesn't need to use any of that data that's already out there about how people use the internet. It makes its own. That's crazy.
It is pretty wild, right? And here's the really smart part. After it's done exploring a bit, it starts to get rid of all the things that didn't really lead anywhere or didn't help it reach its goals. So it's constantly learning what works and what doesn't, just from experience.
That is so different from how large language models usually work. They're usually trained on massive amounts of text data that's already out there.
Exactly. And Shikhar Murty makes the point that we're kind of running out of good static data to use for these models. So learning through interaction is a totally different way to go, and there's a lot of potential there.
It's kind of like the difference between reading every cookbook ever written and actually getting in the kitchen and experimenting. You learn so much more by doing.
You got it. Like a kid learning that a tower of blocks will fall over, or that pushing a button on a Jack-in-the-Box makes something pop out, and NetNav is doing that same kind of thing, but in a digital world.
But how does it know what its goal is if it's just clicking around? Does someone have to tell it?
So that's where this idea of an agent persona comes in. They give NNetNav a specific role, like maybe it's an investor looking for financial news or someone trying to book a flight. So it explores websites with that goal in mind. And then after it interacts with the website, it tries to guess what a human would have told it to do to get that result.
So it's figuring out the intention behind what it just did. That's pretty smart.
It is. And if it figures out that it did something that would help it achieve its bigger goal, like maybe it found the boxes for departure in arrival cities on a flight booking site, that gets rewarded.
I see. So all that pruning stuff you were talking about earlier, that helps it avoid doing things that don't make sense, like clicking the same button a million times right.
Right. And Murty talks about how we humans have this built-in understanding of how websites should work. We kind of know where things should be and what to click, but AI models don't have that intuition. So NNetNav's pruning is all about making sure it interacts with websites in a way that makes sense to us. It learns to avoid the actions that don't make sense.
So it's not just learning what to do, but also what not to do by trying things out and then refining its behavior.
Yeah.
That's really cool. How did they even test to see if this thing actually works?
They tested it out in two environments they call Web Arena and Web Voyager. So Web Arena has these copies of real websites where it can do things like logging in, and Web Voyager uses real live websites, but it can only do certain things so it doesn't mess anything up in the real world.
So it's like a safe space for it to practice.
Exactly. And they collected something like 10,000 successful interaction sequences that NNetNav did on 20 different websites. And then they used those to make it even better. So when they compared how NNetNav performed before and after, it got a lot better, and it actually did really well compared to GPT-4 and even beat other open source methods that are out there. Here's another cool thing. It did all of this using way fewer parameters, which means it's more efficient and faster.
So it's basically getting the same or even better results, but using less computing power. That's awesome.
Yeah.
But did they run into any problems? Was it perfect?
Well, no AI is perfect, right? They found that it was only able to successfully do about 1 out of every 6 tasks it was given. And they think that's mostly because it's still really hard to train an AI that can handle all the different kinds of websites that are out there.
And it sounds like even if it learns how to use one type of website, it doesn't mean it can automatically use a different type of website.
Exactly. They found that it doesn't really generalize well across different website designs. And Murty said that even if you train it on a lot of websites, it's still not going to be great on new ones. So that's a big thing they're working on now, is figuring out how to make it learn on the fly.
So they're working on getting to a point where AI agents can just adapt and learn how to use any website in real time. That would be incredible.
It would be. And Shikhar Murty says he's getting ideas from robotics for this next step. In robotics, they often train a robot first by showing it how to do things, and then they let it learn on its own through trial and error, and it gets feedback as it goes.
That makes sense. You need a basic understanding before you can just go off and learn on your own right.
Right. So Murty thinks that NNetNav could be that basic model that they can use to test out these reinforcement learning techniques for controlling computers. The next step is to figure out how to make it learn continuously and adapt to new situations.
Didn't he also say that this whole interactive learning thing could actually make large language models better too?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's another interesting avenue they're exploring. Right now, if you ask a large language model to do the same thing but phrase it differently, it might treat them as totally different requests. Like if you say, find me a flight from San Francisco to New York versus I want to travel from SFO to JFK. But if AI could learn that those two phrases both mean the same thing and lead to the same actions on a website, it would be way better at understanding what we want.
That's really interesting. So it's about connecting language with real-world actions and then using that to make the AI better at understanding what we mean when we use language.
Yeah.
So taking a step back, what are the big picture implications of all of this NNetNav stuff? I mean, why should people care?
Well, as we start to see AI agents being used more and more in everyday life, hopefully people will choose options like NNetNav that are designed to protect privacy. But the more powerful these agents get, the more important it is for us to have discussions and rules about how to make sure they're being used safely and responsibly.
Because they can make mistakes or spread misinformation or even be used by bad actors to do harmful things online, right?
Exactly. And Murty specifically talks about the need for things like audits and guardrails to make sure that these AI agents are doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, that seems like a pretty important thing to consider as we move toward a future where AI is making more and more decisions for us. Now, the opinion piece that we read that had a slightly different take on all of this. They were talking about NNetNav as a bigger shift in the field of AI in general. What do they mean by that?
Right. So Michael, in that piece, he was arguing that NNetNav is more than just a new AI tool. It's actually moving us away from what he calls passive learning in AI, just feeding it tons of data. He sees it as a step toward AI that's more interactive and actually understands the world through experience.
So it's not just about finding patterns in data, but actually learning from doing things in the real world, or at least the digital world.
Exactly. And Michael thinks that NNetNav's approach could change how we train AI models in the future. We might not need to rely on those massive data sets anymore, and AI might be able to adapt to new situations much better. He even talks about a future where AI learns our preferences by watching how we interact with things online.
And that ties back to what we were talking about before with privacy.
Yeah.
If the AI is learning by doing instead of by constantly collecting data on us, that's a lot better for our privacy.
Absolutely. And Michael really emphasizes that NNetNav is open and transparent, unlike some of these proprietary models that we don't really know how they work. He thinks NNetNav could be a model for how to develop AI that respects user privacy.
It's really interesting how this whole conversation about AI learning makes you think about how we humans learn too. The opinion piece talked about that a bit as well, didn't it?
It did. Michael was pointing out that NNetNav is all about being curious and exploring and learning through trial and error. And he asks whether maybe our traditional ways of learning, like memorization and passive listening, are really the best way to learn in a digital world. If AI is benefiting from being more interactive and hands-on, maybe we should be doing more of that too.
Yeah, maybe we could learn something about how to teach humans by watching how we're trying to teach AI to learn.
Exactly. And Michael sees potential for this kind of AI to be used in all sorts of areas, like personalized education, where the learning material adapts to how you're doing, or in the workplace, where it could help people get things done more efficiently without having to track all their data. And he even thinks it could lead to technologies that are more accessible and adaptable to different people's needs.
So it's not just about making AI more efficient. It's about changing the way we think about technology and how we learn. That's pretty big.
It is. And Michael thinks NNetNav is moving us toward what he calls embodied intelligence, which is AI that's not just a tool for prediction or generating text, but AI that's actually capable of learning and collaborating with us in a more human-like way.
So basically what we're seeing with NNetNav is a completely new way to approach AI agents. It's about moving away from data-driven models and focusing on active exploration and interaction, kind of like how a child learns about the world.
That's a great way to sum it up. And the best part is that this new approach has the potential to make AI more efficient, more capable, and more respectful of our privacy.
It really makes you think about what it means to have AI that doesn't just give us information, but actually learns and grows alongside us. It's a whole new level of partnership.
It really is. So this whole deep dive into NNetNav, it brings up a big question, doesn't it? What is intelligence? Is it just about knowing a lot of facts, or is it about being curious and exploring and making discoveries? Maybe the way we think about AI and how we try to make it more intelligent can teach us something about how we learn and how we define intelligence in ourselves.